Hello everybody and welcome back to another Overwatch League 2021 roster video. Today we will be taking a look at the Atlanta Reign. The Atlanta Reign finished the 2020 season in 12th place overall with a 10-11 record and a +9 differential. They are the only team in the league to finish the season with a negative record and a positive differential. And a fun fact, they finished a season with a better differential than the LA Gladiators, the LA Valiant, and the Guangzhou Charge, the Seoul Dynasty, Hangzhou Spark. So they finished the season with a actually not bad differential. They beat some of these really low teams, but they struggled a lot against the best teams in the league. That was the status of the Reign last season. They were the eternal gatekeepers, it seemed. They could beat these teams that are worse than them. They could destroy the Uprising and the Justice and, for the most part, the Titans, the Outlaws, the Defiant, the Fuel. But when it came to matchups with teams like the Valiant, they struggled. And with the Mayhem and the Gladiators and the Eternal for most of the season. And, of course, the Fusion and the Shock. So has this team done enough going into 2021 to make themselves better contenders with the rest of the North American region? Let's see about that. Let's start with the tank line for this team. This, to me, is these two players are the players who need to show up the most this season. They are the players that need to take the biggest next step, because I felt that while Gator and Hawk were good last season, they were in the middle of the pack main tank players. I thought Hawk was pretty good on Sigma, and his Diva was alright. I don't really remember much about his Zarya, if he even played any Zarya. Or Hog. I think Gator played the Hog in the playoffs, if they played it. I don't even fully remember. At this point, I didn't watch a ton of Atlanta Reign when playoffs time came around. But I thought that this tank line for most of the season was just average. And when they could play a meta that really worked for them, when they could play like a Rhine composition with Gator on the Reinhardt, and you can put Hawk on something. His Zarya actually wasn't awful when you had him pairing with the Reinhardt, but I thought the rest of Gator's pool was not amazing. His Reese is fine. It's not bad by any means, but it's not incredible. And so I think this tank line is really the place where you need to see this roster take the next step. Because I felt like last season it was the thing that had the most potential and didn't really meet that potential. But not only that, when you look at the rest of this roster, which we'll get to it, of course, later on, this is the part of the roster that changed the least, I think, going into 2021. And so you kind of hope that if you make small changes, you need to make sure that the players are able to kind of reach that next level. And Gator and Hawk are both good, but I think that there is a sentiment when you watch this team, and there are things when you watch them, that they are not world beaters. They're not the best in the league at their role. There are better than them. They're not the best North American main tank and off tank. They're not the best from the US. I'd rather have Super. I'd rather have Space. But they are still good, and they have the synergy from playing with each other on Atlanta Reign. So at this point, it's really just a matter of what can we expect from them, and can they hit the next level? Can they hit a peak, and can they play at a higher level now so that they are one of the teams that can compete in this North American region, which is getting a lot better. You need to get a lot more out of your team when the other teams around you are making a lot of changes and getting a lot better as a result. And so, for me, it is one of the biggest factors that I am looking out for going into the season. Can this tank line take the next step? We know that they have potential. We know they looked very good in contenders. I mean, you look back at their gauntlet run with Atlanta Academy. That was a very impressive run where they were beating really good teams. They lost in the finals to Element Mystic, but they had to beat like Runaway on the way there. So when you have impressive runs like that, and you know these players have potential, the question will always be, can they bring that to the next level? And so far, I don't think we've seen them really hit that peak. And that's what I need out of Gator and Hawk. They are the two players who need to hit their peak the most, or else this team will struggle heavily to deal with the players put in front of them. Moving on to the support line for the Atlanta Reign, you have two returning players as well. You have Masa, of course, who has been with the team since the beginning, and also Iris, or Iris, who joined this team late in the 2020 season. Did not get a ton of playtime, spent a lot of time splitting time with Dogman for reasons. But I actually really like Iris. I think he is one of the best flex supports that came out of North America. He is a Korean player who is just playing in Contenders North America for Third Impact. So, there is a bit of a, take that with a grain of salt, because he isn't necessarily, he isn't an American player, but, he even played in Contenders Pacific for a time with Far East Society. So, this is a good player, Iris, and I think he is a major upgrade over Dogman. No offense to Dogman, no offense to my boy Dustin Bowerman. Loving the show, Dustin. Doing great things now. I think you do a great job over there. Iris is a very good flex support. He has shown up in a lot of different situations in his playing career. Looked very good in Contenders North America, so he brings a lot more solid, consistent play and high-level play, pairing that with Masa, who I think is also a very good player. His Lucio is his best hero. That's really where he has shined the most. His Mercy's Brig are fine. They're okay. I would not be surprised if the Reign go after another main support player during the season, because I do think Masa is good, and is good enough to be able to bring this team to a competitive level. But the league is getting very good and getting better all the time, so I think there is a very strong possibility that you may need to sign another main support. Main support's one of the roles that I have found, in general, I don't think there's a domination by Korean talent in this role. In a lot of other roles, like you look at flex support, for example, there are almost no flex supports in the league this season that are not Korean. There's Molly on the Shanghai Dragons, who's Chinese. There's also a couple on the Chengdu Hunters, and you have Crimzo and the Houston Outlaws, but there's really not many Western flex supports. But there's a decent amount of Western main supports, and I think main supports have actually been a position where Western players have actually tended to be on the higher echelons, or the upper echelons. Like, arguably the best main support in the league is Moth, who is a Western player. You could also argue Lee J. Gon, but I would personally say Moth is better. FD God is very good. Funny Asher is very good. Moss is good. So there are more players that are Western in the main support role that tend to succeed. And I look at Masa as a player who has a lot of potential and who has shown to be one of those players in that high impact role who has looked good and has had success. But once again, in kind of the same problems that I think you have with Gator and Hawk, I don't think Masa looks good on every hero. I think his Lucio is really good. I don't really love his Mercy and his Brig. They're not bad, but they are certainly not as good as his Lucio, which in GOATs, hey, that didn't really matter because that was all you were running. Now it's a little more prominent, and I think it's a little more obvious that you need a good main support who can play different heroes at a high level, and so that is where I am a little concerned with the support line. They don't have flexibility. I think that Iris can play all the flexible heroes, that's fine. Masa can play Lucio at a very high level. I need to see more out of his Brig and his Mercy. before I'm ready to say this is a team that is ready to make the next jump into the kind of elite tier. They are a team that I think right now, especially with the support line, they're right on the outside of that elite tier. There are a lot of teams in North America that I think have weaknesses and have holes and things that they have not figured out yet. And I think that one of the things that this Atlanta Reign roster needs to do is improve in the areas they've struggled in the past and ensure that this roster has more space to succeed and finds more success in the future, because that is where ultimately I think this team will be able to take that next step. If they are unable to improve these places that I think were weak last season, the tank line, the DPS line at times, and I think they've improved at the flexible position, so they should be fine there. That is where they're going to struggle. The final role here is, of course, the damage role. To start, I want to talk about Pelican, the rookie player coming out of O2 Blast. He is their flex DPS player, their primary flex DPS player. He is the player who's going to play your Tracer, your Genji, your Mei, your Echo. I love it said Tracer first. He's going to play your Genji, your Mei, your Echo, stuff like that. He is the replacement for Erster, basically. And Pelican is very good. Pelican is a really, really, really good flex DPS player. This team played in the Valiant Winter Ball, and Pelican was dominating. I mean, he was dominating everybody. Every player in the ball was just getting obliterated by the Pelican. They made the finals of that tournament, and a lot of that was on the back of Pelican. He just looked like he rejuvenated this team. When you pair that with Edison, who is going to be kind of your flex DPS, whereas Pelican is kind of your projectile DPS. He is flexible because he can run that Tracer, and he even has Sombra, which is sometimes in that kind of position. Edison can play your Tracer and your Widow and your McCree. He can also play your Doomfist, and if need be, he can play your Genji. And so you have a very interesting dynamic with these two, and then you have your third DPS player. Now, there are rumors that the Atlanta Reign have added Kai, formerly known as KSP, from the LA Valiant, to this roster. It has not been announced yet as of me recording this video. It has not been confirmed as of me recording this video, but I do believe it is true, based on the fact that I think Halo of Thoughts, his track record precedes him, that he is usually correct, and also the aforementioned Dogman on the Dustin Bowerman show basically confirmed it, saying he knew that this move was happening, and so now that it was reported, he was basically just saying, yeah, it happened. So be on the lookout for the announcement of Kai joining this team. The second part of the rumor is that they are no longer going to keep Sharp, who would have been then their dedicated hit scan player. I thought Sharp was good last season, but KSP, Kai now, was one of the best players last season. I think that he was robbed of being a role star. I genuinely think he was arguably the best hit scan player last season in just sniper play. I mean, his Widowmaker was arguably the best last season. If not hit scan more broadly, arguably the best Widowmaker last season. So you're adding an incredible player in Kai, most likely, who has just been elevating his former team now, the LA Valiant, and is now going to come to an Atlanta Reign team who are good, who are very strong, and I think Kai is once again going to be able to elevate this team. He is that type of player who can just go into a match and just carry. And you pair him with Pelican, who I also believe has that level of play and that level of talent. I think that really helps Hawk and Gator, who I think were some of the weaker points last season, become so much more enabled, because there's going to be so many situations where you're going to have a 5v6 fight because Kai just comes off to the side, gets a pick, or Pelican comes in with a huge play on the DPS position. And I think that is really the key to the success with Atlanta Reign. It's not going to be how well this team is able to have this kind of elite level tank play. It's, can Gator and Hawk make the most out of the advantages that will likely be given to them by the great play from Kai and Pelican? Those are the two players who I'm looking out for the most. Edison as well will play a role for this team, especially if it's like a double hit scan type of meta, if they need to have like Widow Tracer or McCree Tracer. I would expect that if there's a Tracer meta, we probably won't see a ton of Kai, unless it's like Tracer Ash, we saw a lot last season. But if it were like a Tracer Genji or a Tracer McCree, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Edison Pelican in for that. I also wouldn't be surprised if it was Edison Kai. I really do think that there will be a rotation of all three of them, and I think all three of them are going to have very big roles in this team. I think part of what the Reign struggled with last season was they had 4 really good DPS players that they were trying to juggle for a decent amount of season, or 3 at least that were strong with Baby Bay and Erster and Edison. They struggled to kind of incorporate them because in a lot of cases, the overlap basically just made you where you were never going to play them all. I don't think that'll be a thing this season, because I think with Kai, it's really going to be like, you don't want Kai playing unless you need those really strong sniper players. You do need that kind of a lot. That's something that we've seen a decent amount, but it is the team I'm really looking out for, and I'm interested to see how this DPS lineup does. I think this has the possibility of being an elite level DPS lineup. I think it is arguably a top 3 in North America. That's saying a lot because you have some really good DPS lineups, but I mean, you have the Shock, which are really good, and I think that you would be hard pressed to say that the lineup there is weak. But then you kind of look at some of these other lineups you have. The Dallas Fuel are good, but I don't really. They have holes. They don't have a great Tracer player. They don't have a great Ashe player, so that's something that you would take a bit of a problem with. You also have that problem with the Washington Justice. You have a really good player in Decay, and then you have Jerry and Tuba, who are both good, but I don't know if they are elite. I think Kai, Pelican, and Edison have all been consistent and have looked like some of the best at their roles. So I do really think this Atlanta Reign team has the possibility to be an elite DPS line, and that will help elevate this team. I think a lot of people are somewhat low on this team. They kind of have them in that kind of like middle of NA region. And while I think that is something that is reasonable because you have some really good teams like Washington, like Dallas, the San Francisco Shock, the LA Gladiators. To me, it's like those 4 are the only 4 teams that I look at in North America that I think this Atlanta Reign team might struggle against like consistently. And even then, I really think the only teams that I look at that I think are hands down definitively 100% better than the Atlanta Reign are the San Francisco Shock and the LA Gladiators. I think that the DPS lineup on this team is better than that of the Justice, better than that of the Fuel, and I think that is good enough potentially to help lead this team. They're very close with the Justice, I think, in terms of the DPS lineup, just because of how good Decay is. But I do really think this Atlanta Reign team is a team that a lot of people are sleeping on, and they are better than what a lot of people are giving them credit for. So I am keeping my eyes on them, and I think that this Atlanta Reign team is going to turn a lot of heads this season. People are going to realize that this team is better than what they appeared, and a lot of the preseason predictions for this Reign team are not going to be quite as high as what I think the team's peak actually is going to be. I do think this is a team that has a shot to surprise some people. I would not be surprised if we see another instance where the Atlanta Reign get that big upset win over the San Francisco Shock. But those are just my thoughts on this Atlanta Reign team. Let me know your thoughts on them in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, consider liking and subscribing for more content like this in the future. But that is all from me. Hope you all enjoyed. Hope you're all staying safe and staying healthy. And until next time, bye-bye.